Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to do another movie review for you guys, and this time it is for the documentary Val. So my channel is I I talk about chronic illness or anything related to chronic illness, any topics that are that I can sort of um, I guess integrate into chronic illness. So you might be wondering why I'm talking about Val. So if anybody that is familiar with the actor Val Kilmer, or maybe not too familiar with him, he had throat cancer a while ago. And I was I knew about this a little bit, like I knew something had happened to him. I was not fully aware of the extent of what had happened to him. There had been like lots of rumors, that I mean, there's always been rumors about him that he's kind of like difficult and he'd kind of gone crazy or something. I don't know. But what happened was he got throat cancer. And from what I understand, it seemed like, I guess, a pretty aggressive throat cancer. And he went through radiation and, I mean, basically got rid of the throat cancer. But if you're familiar with radiation, radiation is pretty awful and it leaves you messed up basically for the rest of your life. I have an uncle that did radiation for prostate cancer, and it's just been a nightmare for him for probably like 20 years at this point. So, to me, that qualifies as a chronic illness or a chronic condition, even though they are cancer free and they no longer have the cancer or that immediate threat of death. You still have complications. And I wasn't aware of that either for whatever reason, even though we know radiation is horrible. I don't know why, I just didn't realize just how long term the effects are of radiation. So basically, you go from being generally a healthy person. So if you've seen this documentary, he was generally healthy. He doesn't really talk about having any medical issues or I don't know, he wasn't like a smoker. I don't really know why he got throat cancer. Like it doesn't really say much about it because he seemed like a generally healthy person. And then just started having, I think, discomfort in his throat, or he was losing his voice or something, and went to the doctors and think he had some pretty advanced throat cancer. And I think when cancer is more advanced, that's when they turn to radiation, because I believe it was the same thing for my uncle. The cancer was a little bit in the later stages, so I guess they have to hit it with radiation. Um, so he is no longer the same. He basically cannot speak. He can. He has like a hole here. I know that there's a name for it, but I don't know what the name is. And so he has to like cover it in order to speak, but then he can't cover it when he eats. I mean, it's just a whole thing. I just want to say right off the bat, this was probably one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. It was. I did a review of the Selma Blair documentary, which is also really good. But if you want to talk about, if you're a film buff, if you are a film snob like myself, this was it. I mean, it was just beautifully done. It was narrated by his son. His son and his daughter kind of are in this documentary a lot. His ex-wife is also in it, but I think his son and his daughter play such a huge role because I think they helped him with the documentary, but also his relationship with them is just something, it's just something else. I mean, it really is. I tear up just talking about it. Just the way that the documentary was done, and how touching, how moving it was. Talking about the other thing too that was really cool about it was that throughout his career, he's been taking like he's had like camcorders and stuff, and he's been taking videos of just stuff, him working on set, his kids. So he's been documenting his own life since forever, and so that really added to the emotional impact of the film. And for me, the biggest impact, and for those of you that are chronically ill, Some people that watch my channel may have been born with a condition or a disability, but for those of us who have become chronically ill at some point in our lives, particularly in our adult lives, that was the part that hit me the most. Going from being a healthy, fully functional individual to suddenly, I mean, in his case, it was almost overnight. I mean, obviously, no illness is overnight. It doesn't just happen that way. But the way that that it happens when you acquire a chronic condition, is very different than being born with one. Or, I mean, it hit me in that way because he did have all of these videos of when he was healthy, when he got married, when he had his kids. He has like home videos of, of being on movie sets, of other actors, of like, all these other great actors that he's worked with. And so you see this person who was just fine. Not only just fine, he was doing big things with his life. He was this actor. He was, starring in these, you know, I mean, blockbuster films. And then you see him now, because it goes back and forth. The film goes back and forth between, these home movies that he shot, and then his current life. I think now he does like I think he does like Comic-Con type of events. He does these other like movie screenings of his old films, where he'll make an appearance there. You see him struggle, which that is incredibly painful. And I'm just going to give you guys a heads up. If you have issues watching people struggle physically, I would not watch it, or I would just at least be in the right headspace to watch something like that, because he does struggle. And I'm not talking about walking. In the Selma Blair documentary, you will see stuff like that as well. But the struggles that he has are a bit different than what she's going through. One of the most unexpected things about, I guess, him, that I just didn't like, I didn't anticipate it because of a lot of the rumors and a lot of the stuff that has been said about him. He is an extremely silly, goofy person, and I did not know that he was like that. That was one of the parts that just really surprised me, and he still is, even post illness, post radiation. He is still a massive goofball. Loves to mess around, loves to play jokes on his family. And I think that also, it shows a part of chronic illness that a lot of people kind of get angry at. Like, how can you laugh? How can you still be, if you're really suffering, you wouldn't be, joking around like that. And unfortunately, we have to live with this illness and this condition for probably the rest of our lives, and there's nothing we can do about it. We have our moments, and you will see, there are some lows in the movie, but at the end of the day, you have to live your life. And it can affect, being sick can affect your personality, but I don't think it ever completely destroys your personality. You're always still kind of who you were before. Maybe not as much as you were before, but that person is still there. And there's some people that just retain their personality regardless. And it seems like that's what's happened with him. I mean, he's still just this like super goofy, out there, just crazy guy. And I was really surprised to see that. I imagined him to be, because back in his day, he was this like super hot, really good looking, heartthrob type of actor. And that's another thing that really he didn't see himself that way, which is really interesting because we see him that way. We've known him that way, right? He was Batman. He was in, what was it, Top Gun, I think. And he's like this, blonde California heartthrob. And he really doesn't, that's not really, that didn't register for him in his head. He was an actor, and he was very, very, very invested in his craft. That was another surprising thing, that I think it bothered him that he could not just be an actor, and that he had to be this like blockbuster movie star. And so right before he's diagnosed with cancer, he was doing more of that. He was doing more of like stage acting, projects that he wanted to do, to display his humor, to display his, his talent without the distraction of his face. And you'll see what I'm talking about if you watch the documentary. And because of all the treatment, obviously he is older now as well, but because of all the treatment, because of, I'm sure he's had surgeries and things like that, he's a bit disfigured. He looks a lot different than what we remember. And that doesn't really seem to bother him. I don't think he really, like I said, he didn't really look at himself that way. So it was fascinating. I mean, this film was just fascinating because he does keep his life relatively quiet, because we don't really know much. I didn't really know any of this about him. And I knew little about his cancer and what had happened to him. And this film just really does a deep dive. I mean, there are moments where, you just can barely hold back the tears. And, it also shows how life just continues on, regardless of what happens to you. Life just keeps moving forward. But if you're looking for something, like I said, if you are a movie person, if you are a documentary person, if you're looking for something that is, I'm thinking Oscar worthy, this is it. This would be it. It was really, really good. And not to say that the Selma Blair documentary was not good. It was also good. But as far as, just the way that it's depicted, the way that it's shot, it just was so well done. I don't know. If you're a movie person, that's the one, right? I don't want to say that the other documentary is bad. This one is, it just cinematically, just caught my eye more, and it was, I think, more intense, and you kind of get lost in it. And it doesn't just focus, obviously the Selma Blair's documentary focuses mostly on her illness, whereas his documentary focuses on his life. So kind of beginning to the current, where he's at. And you discover a lot of different things that have shaped him. He talks about his divorce, and you see how that affects him. I just felt that it was worth mentioning because he does struggle with this, and this is going to be the rest of his life, right? You don't recover from radiation. I don't think there's any cure for that. They got rid of the cancer, but you don't really get rid of the effects of radiation, which is why I consider it a chronic condition. And, judging from, my uncle's experience, who he's also struggling a lot right now. He's been in the hospital, I think, for a couple of weeks at this point. It's a chronic condition. They are sick. They have symptoms that come and go, and that's going to be for the rest of their life. And I actually did Google it after watching the documentary, because I was not, I know from my uncle's experience, but I thought it was just like complications from surgeries and things like that. But apparently this is the reality of having radiation. You're just never the same after that, and you continue to have problems basically for the rest of your life. So I do think that these types of conditions, the aftermath of, I mean, the people become disabled from surgeries. Even though the surgery is meant to help, sometimes it doesn't, and it just makes the situation worse. So there are other, I think it's also important to note that there are other chronic conditions besides, autoimmune illnesses and infectious diseases like Lyme disease and, that kind of thing, that there are chronic conditions that are the result of medical treatment, necessary medical treatment, and that can last a lifetime or the rest of your life because there's really no remedy for it. So I would definitely recommend it. I do consider this a different depiction of chronic illness. For those of us that have suffered with like autoimmune illness, this is different. It is different, but also similar in a lot of ways. And that before and after, I think, is what really, really gets you, is just the life I had and the life I'm living now. And that, I mean, I think all of us that have become ill, especially in adulthood, I think we can relate to that. You look back at your childhood and it's like, I never got sick. I was fine. I went to school. I went to college. I was, living life. And then suddenly, within what feels like a short amount of time, I'm no longer well. So it's a different trajectory than the Selma Blair documentary. And if you watch the Selma Blair documentary, you'll see her trajectory was, it's also very similar to some chronic illness experiences, because there are some of us that were like, oh, I had a lot of weird things as a kid, and when I was a teenager, when I hit puberty, I started, we have these suspicions like all our lives. Some of us, I have heard that story as well from some people that are chronically ill. But there are also others that just, it seems like I was doing really well and then suddenly I got hit with this thing, and, So I think they're two different stories, but both are very relatable for chronically ill people. And I think we need a variety of stories to sort of show people that it's not a one size fits all. It's not always an autoimmune illness. It's not always, a slowly building illness. There is so much gray area. Chronic illness is as varied as human beings, right? We're all very, very different genetically, physically, and so is chronic illness. It doesn't strike everybody the same way. So I highly recommend it if you can tolerate it. And like I said, it is emotionally very intense. I would say it's more intense. It can be more intense than the Selma Blair documentary. As far as the emotions, I think visually the Selma Blair documentary may be a little more intense because you see, her illness has more of a physical manifestation, whereas his illness, I think it's more, yes, it was disfiguring, but it's more of an internal battle, I think, for him specifically. But it's just so good. I cannot say enough about it. And I saw this documentary a few months ago, and I still just can't get over the impact that it has. It is very emotionally intense. And like I said, if you can't handle that kind of emotional intensity, I would avoid it, but it's incredible. I really hope that it gets some kind of awards recognition, because it's absolutely it's Oscar worthy. It's the role of his life, to be quite honest. I mean, he's done some amazing work, and this, I would say, is the absolute masterpiece. It's the pinnacle of his career, and I mean, I can't say much more than that. It is an incredible documentary. So that's what I've got for you guys today. I'll have the Selma Blair review should be up. There's also a book review that should be up as well. Check that out. And I will see you guys again soon. Take care.